Welcome to Birdsong. I'm your host, Kayu Kiora, and in this particular episode, we have Richard Whitehurst joining us in conversation. Richard is an educator, an Ericksonian Psychotherapist, a transpersonal hypnotherapist, a published author, and an international speaker, having been involved in meditation, transformation, and helping others expand their awareness since the 1970s. He has roughly 30 years of clinical experience when it comes to therapeutic trance states and heart-centered orientations to heal trauma, increase emotional maturity, to gain freedom from emotional pain, and to help engender positive changes in the thousands of clients that he's worked with from all over the world. He is also the former president of the Ericksonian Hypnotherapist Association of Australia, the former vice president of the Queensland Professional Hypnotherapists Association. He's a certified HeartMath trainer. He has lectured extensively in colleges, universities, workshops, and conferences in America, England, Europe, India, and in Australia. And he is also the founder of the Overview Institute of Australia and its sister organisation, Planetary Human, both of which we talk about in this conversation. And aside from that, we riff on a lot of things, from mythic imagination to Terence McKenna, resonance causality, poetry, synchronicity, quantum physics, heart consciousness, what it actually means to be a planetary human. We talk about the overview effect, which is described by astronauts as they behold our blue gem of a planet from the void of space. We muse on following your bliss and following your blisters, living mythically, integrating polarities, and there was a lot of stuff that we covered in this conversation, and I think you'll love what the wise and gracious Richard has to share. Let's just get straight into it. Thanks for being here. Thank you for listening/watching, and I trust that you will find value in our dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward. Richard,
ready.
Thank you for being here with me on this fine morning. Well, it's a fine morning for me looking outside my window, but as you spoke to, we could hear the pitter-patter of rain on your tin roof, but it seems like that has ceased for the time being.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's a real joy and very exciting. I love talking to people about the stuff that excites me. And I'm in Southeast Queensland, so we do have a bit of weather coming through. So you might hear that as we progress.
Yeah, it's all welcome. So I want to get straight into things and open up our show. And as you may know, I typically invite guests to share something in relation to honoring the sacred. So I would love to ask you, what is your relationship to the sacred? Or perhaps, what is your relationship to honoring the sacred? What does that look like for you? What does that, or how does that feel for you? And the invitation is there, or rather here, to share something in relation to that. It could be to share a poem, a prayer, an offering, to open up our time and our space together in a ritualistic manner, or perhaps you can just answer it in however way you see and feel fit.
Okay. Well, the sacred is a very broad category of many facets, and I feel pretty much my main 95% of my life is focused on the sacred, whatever that may be. I have my planetary overview stuff. Then I have many categories of awareness or experience that orient towards the sacred. But I will first start with the most immediate sacred, which is that of, for me, the foundational or intrinsic awareness that is always already there. So that is so immediate that the conscious or the conceptual mind jumps right over it. For most of us, it's like, but it is that most immediate of immediate things. And so that, and then tying that into what is a bit of a daily practice for me, which is heart beat breath synchronization, a meditational process that I do, which I learned, it really goes back to the 1970s, let's say 73, 74, when I was living in Hawaii on the Big Island. But all through the years of my life, this idea of being heart focused. And then more recently, I've done some Sufi heart rhythm training, and also became a trainer with HeartMath, who've done a lot of research into this. So it is that immediate realm of the heart, which is the according to Michael Harner, the great academic of shamanism, said the guardian of the shaman was most frequently throughout the world, most frequently in the heart. In the yoga tradition, there's the Paramatma, or the Ishvara, and Para means supreme, Atma means self. In the heart, Ishvara, the supreme controller in the self. In Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhism, the Rigpa, that primordial awareness, basically residing in the heart. So my focus has been on sort of the immediacy of the sacred in my own heart. And there's a beautiful Theophan the Recluse. He was a Christian mystic in the 1800s, and he also said, he did the Jesus prayer, but that was a prayer from the heart. He said, it starts as a slight warmth in the beginning, but as you do this practice, it becomes warmer and warmer and more and more alive, and it draws you in, and you feel this beautiful, not only a beautiful warmth, but this taste and this attractiveness to be there. And there's other things I do when I do it, but my basic practice is 4 beats in and 4 beats out, inhalation, exhalation. And then I align some very basic syllables of gently resting as awareness. So that's 4 syllables, gently resting as awareness, 4 in, 4 out, or simply being loving kindness. Those work for me. But I don't get caught up in the words so much, but it is, that's the basic idea. And that is my, my daily access into the sacred. But everything's sacred. If you know what I'm saying, the poor soul, lying in the gutter is, because he's been hitting the booze or whatever. The sacred sort of runs through everything. And that's my perspective. And I have been sort of saying, well, what are the avenues where I feel the greatest excitement in the sacred? So one is the Planetary Overview. That's a really big deal for me. It's not a big deal conceptually. It's a big deal energetically. I just get excited. From the first time I saw, there was this publication called the Whole Earth Catalog, which came out in the late 60s. And 68, they had a satellite image before humans had seen a satellite image of the black cover, pretty big, floppy catalog, access to tools. Planet Earth, black cover, Whole Earth Catalog. Holy shit! Look, I was a teenager. My mind was blown. And then they started getting the Earth images, Apollo 8, and so that is a really sort of a sacred thing, which is this. Right now, it's imaginary. It's imaginary, and I extrapolate. I imagine and I extrapolate. What would it be like? But there's a lot of videos and things which sort of indicate. And I just saw this thing a couple days ago. I put it on my Facebook group, which is called Overview Earth, about a young guy. He has a telescope in LA, I think, takes it out, and he just puts it out on the sidewalk, and he says, hey, what are you doing, man? A telescope. And what do you say? And so they look through, and it's the moon, right? And they see the craters, they see the greater substance and the reality of what it is. And they have whole series. My God, everyone's saying, "Oh my God," or "Wow, wow," and there's an incredible expression of wonderment and awe and amazement. So, in that sense, we have people about to go into orbit that are not astronauts, just commercial space flight. We believe a lot of that will. And these will mostly be people with a lot of money, probably decision makers. We expect there to be a much greater, response to the reality of, we're living on a planet, man. Buckminster Fuller, it's a spaceship. We're all crew. We are all crew on a spaceship. And, if you're on a small spaceship, you're not lighting up cigarettes. You're not, using hairspray or deodorant or any of that stuff, right? You have to be very conscientious, protect, sustain the environment, also regenerate the environment where necessary. That's a little foray into the sacred for me. There's so much I could say, but That's a start.
That's a good start indeed. And there will be much more to be said in this regard, I'm sure. And you touched on something that I wanted to use as a bit of a springboard, if you will, to jump into the greater expanse of our conversation. And that is this notion, this perhaps way of living and breathing, as I generally articulate, of being a planetary human and the work that you are involved in conducting in this regard. And I thought it was interesting what you had to say in relation to one of the greater intentions which you shared with me through our previous correspondence. And that was to the intention, one of the intentions is to direct attention and marshal the collective will to further catalyze humanity's entrance into these new paradigms of personal and planetary regenerations and thrivings. And from what I understand, one of the frameworks supporting this vision is the planetary human vision keys, in which there are 11 different keys. And if we were to start at key number 1, there's probably 2 different ways we could veer off with our conversation. One is weaving throughout the various keys in sequential order, but perhaps the other is going down this path of the overview effect. So what I might do is pass it back onto you to take the reins of our dialogue into the uncharted lands of our greater conversation. And see which way you'd like to take it.
You're an awesome interviewer, and I've watched your other interviews, and I'm going, wow, I so want this podcast to just grow and become gigantic because you're great. And that you've passed that on to me, though. Okay, well, planetary perspective, right? Since we were kids in school, we saw the globes on the teacher's desk or somewhere, in the school. There's the Earth globe, and it turns around. Countries in different colors, right? Well, there are no colors of the countries, and there are no borders from space. The astronaut Nicole Stott says, the only border that really matters is the dark blue seam that blankets us and protects us from the certain death of outer space. Many astronauts say, we went up into space and we'd all seen these things, but one of the things that really strikes them right off the bat is the fragility of the apparent fragility, because the atmosphere is it's a thin film of gas. It's nothing to us here. We look up, oh my God, it just goes up and up. But double the height of a commercial airliner. So we've all seen those, right? Just one more of those, and you're at the fringe of space. That's 22 kilometers. Death zone on Everest, 8 kilometers. Commercial airliners, 11 kilometers. One more, you need oxygen. The curvature of the world is apparent, obviously. It's a giant sphere. And that's it. So the only border that really matters. So to me, I've just followed my bliss on this thing since, as I mentioned, since the late 60s. And I came across a book by Kevin W. Kelley back in the 88, I think I saw it, called The Home Planet. And big coffee table edition, opened it up, and I was like, I can still remember that I first saw it, like, whoa, these gigantic images, Earth from space, with little snippets from astronauts. And they're all basically saying, more or less, my mind is fully blown by this. Many of them say, I thought I was a tough guy, very hardened up empirical scientist, engineer, test pilot. But I saw it, I started crying, right? The reality of it, it's actually difficult. I think about this all the time, and still I know I'm not fooled by the fact that I haven't seen it. I have imagined it. I've seen many, many videos, probably way more than just about everybody else, except a couple of my close colleagues around the world. But the actual reality of seeing the Earth from space, which is why I'm earlier referencing that little thing of people watching in LA on the streets looking at the moon through that telescope. Yeah, it's the moon. But to see, holy shit, right? They're all saying that. They're blown away. And I posted this thing about that. I said, well, you multiply by a factor of about 50, and you get the impact of the reality. We are on this sphere and floating in a virtually, I don't use the word infinite very much because I've thought about what infinite is, and it means it never ends. But a limitless, nearly limitless abyss, cosmic abyss. And we're in that. And the sun, I was in Byron Bay a few years ago, and I remember I was right there at sunrise. Have you been to that lighthouse, Byron Bay?
I have.
Yeah. Sunrise, the sun had just risen. I was there by myself. Hardly anyone else was there. And it just dropped in. 150 million kilometers away is this intense, raging ball of gas, thermonuclear thing that's going on. And it's there. And take away the atmosphere, it's black space, that's what the astronauts all say. You realize it's not the sun, it's a star. It's a star. And all those little black dots that we see in the sky, which are only about maybe less than 4,000 on the darkest of dark moonless nights, there's like up to 400 billion of those in our home galaxy. So the point is that it is just so mind-blowing. And if we are stumbling through our days and feeling bored, one comedian I heard, Louis C.K., said, you don't have the right to be bored, because the realities of this situation that we are in, the biochemical realities of our physical body, the trillions, 50 trillion or so, give or take some trillions, cells in our body, the chemical reactions that are happening every second to run this. I heard a figure, 300 trillion. There's 1 trillion, 2 trillion. You count three. It's just inconceivable. So really, from one perspective, we should be just stumbling through our days in a state of utter amazement. But I think that I can't get the moon to Earth. I cannot get that distance. I can say the number, 284,000 miles or whatever it is, 350,000 kilometers, whatever it is. But that distance, I can't get it in here. What to speak of Mars, what to speak of the next star away, right? These things are numbers. We're cheated by numbers in a sense. We can add zeros, but it doesn't mean we get it. I heard the example, if you took a green pea, and the next star closest to our star, the sun, would be like 140 kilometers away. And that's only 2.4 light years. Light years. The distance light travels in 1 year. In 1 second, light goes about 8 or 9 times around the Earth. 1 second. That's the distance of a light second. 8 minutes to the sun, 150 million kilometers, right? So anyway, these things are mind-blowing. They're amazing. And if we scratch the surface of our high school science, we can start to get into states of deep awe and gratitude and appreciation. We can reframe our whole situation here on the planet on being a human presence, self-reflective awareness on this planet with millions of life forms, and the whole interconnectedness of the ecosystem, this birthing of a new awareness, this simultaneous destruction and birthing that's going on, right? And were you there for your daughter's birth?
I certainly was.
Yeah, I was there for some of my kids being born. Just about all of them. My first one was born in India, couldn't be there. Men are not allowed to be there.
Yeah,
but
sure.
but for my others, I was there. And it's a miracle. You just go, this is incredible. It's a miracle. But it's bloody. It's intense. It's a type of destruction going on, right? There's or you take fruit coming on a tree. It's a beautiful flower. Oh, it's a beautiful flower, right? But then it starts to wilt. Oh no, man! If you see cherry blossoms or citrus blooming, it's all beautiful, and then they start to turn brown and they start falling off. But then after that death, something is happening, right? This dying process the mother and baby go through, and then something is happening, something's coming through, and it's like, holy smoke, it's the fruit. And I don't know about you, but for me, if it's between a flower and a fruit, I love flowers, but I'll take the fruit. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like that, the overview effect. So this was an expression coined by the space philosopher and author Frank White, and he's now, I'm proud to say he's a friend and a colleague. But back in whenever 1991, when I saw his book, it was just like, wow, far out, someone's written about this stuff, right? Now we talk frequently, and he's just a beautiful guy. He's older than me. He's like in his sort of early mid 70s. Anyway, the overview effect. What happens to a human being, to the organism, when we are exposed to this image of the planet from where we originated, in this present way of thinking, and we look down, holy shit, that's where I am. That's the context. So for me, context is a hugely significant term, word, idea, concept, contextual. Where are we? That, like in psychedelic journeys, for example, what are the two most important things they always say over and over again?
Yeah.
Set and setting.
Classics.
Set and setting. Yeah. And that is because this journey we're on as humans, really psychedelic, mind manifesting, mind expanding, right? We can expand our minds, and we don't need to do it chemically, although we can, but I'm saying the realities of the situation, just like we just need to jump out of a stupor that we tend to be in, because Terence McKenna,
of course,
goes,
yes,
yeah, culture is not your friend, right? Culture is not your friend. We get enculturated by, my wife and I were just talking about it this morning. I think it was Thomas Aquinas, the founder of the Jesuit order in the Catholic Church, said, give me the boy till he's 7 and I'll have the man for life, right? That idea is that's the big, solid, hardcore, deep conditioning that occurs in the human organism first 6 or 7 years, And language is, our language. I see a lot of non-dual philosophers or non-dual teachers, but they're using this linear language, subject, predicate, object, linear, I, and it's hard to talk about these things using the English language. It's not set up for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, especially since the Cartesian split, it really has created more of that divide between self and other. And even when you're talking about mind, we tend to conceptualize or think of mind as being purely up here. But when we're talking about mind, we can extrapolate that out. Mind of head, mind of heart, mind of body, mind of place, mind of planet.
Yeah, that's why I like very much the Tibetan Buddhist word and sort of the non-path of Dzogchen, which I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not anything. I don't even see myself as human, but you know what I'm saying. And it is that idea of one of the teachers there goes, it's empty-ness. It's not empty, which is like nihilistic. It's the ness. The ness is the cognizing part. So sometimes they refer to it as cognizing emptiness. But that's that second one that I go into. Those are not in sequence of significance necessarily on the website, planetaryhuman.com. But I do happen to have that sequence. First is planetary perspective. Because, if everyone could go into space, and I do have this beautiful little video of James May of Top Gear. He's the big guy with the long hair. And he goes up into a U-2 spy plane, 22 kilometers, oxygen helmet. It's a 4-minute clip, and I've got it on the websites. And comes down, he's just going, whoo, whoo. And I take the helmet off, he's going, whoa, and he finally gets up, he's walking down the thing, he pauses, and he says, if everyone could have that, that's only 22 kilometers, because the further out you get, the more mind-blowing. If everyone could have that, it would change the face of everything. Politics, religion, education, everything, right? That recontextualizing, so reframe. So some have had spiritual experiences that would you actually say, well, that was a full-blown spiritual. That just connects you bigger to more. But so to me, I see it's not the savior of humanity. It's just one of the elements that will really contribute to waking up further and saying, well, we need to engage differently. We need to engage differently. And that leads me right into a next really big thing for me, which is famous quote by Gandhi, be the change you wish to see in the world. What does that mean, right? What does it mean? And it has to do with being, to be it, not to do it, right? Yeah, we have to do, but to me more powerful is to be, right? And that is the idea, as differing from impact causation. They got wars against everything now. War against drugs, war against poverty, there are many beautiful teachings where someone becomes the warrior, right? One of my members on my advisory boards for Planetary Human, Douglas Gillette, he co-authored with Robert Moore, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. You might know that book. It's a very prominent book in the men's movement. Archetypal Dimensions of the Masculine. Beautiful book. And right now, my view is that to shift out of the warriorship, to shift into the magician and maybe some of the lover. Anyway, I'm into the magician aspect of things. But it is resonant causation as differing from impact causation. And impact causation is bomb them with bigger bombs, build a bigger army, force it, make it work. Was it Nike? Just do it, that kind of thing. And now my perspective is to be it. And the doing will sort of naturally unfold without any effort at all. But to be the resonance that you wish the world to be in, right? So unfortunately, there's been this huge wave of fear has gone through with this whole CV-19 thing. And yeah, that's too bad. That's the way it's gone for a lot of people, because really what we need is we need to vibrate high frequency vibrations. That's what we need to be, each one of us, because we matter. In even the most overt, objective way of thinking about it, we are feeding the field, the planetary field. They have measurements. They've shown it empirically. When 9/11 occurred, there were two geosynchronous orbit satellites, and they were measuring the Earth's electromagnetic field, and it got it, boom, huge spikes on both of them. So for like 4 or 5 hours, this massive spike. Yeah. Anyway. I can segue off, and Kayo, I might need you to pull me back. But anyway.
It's all great. And there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, for sure.
There is, yeah. Planetary perspective, to me, that's hugely significant. And I encourage everyone to start excavating into these things. Intrinsic awareness, it's right there. We don't need to get anything. We just need to, we already have the treasure. It's already there. That's right. And you mentioned Descartes, it's like, but it is a contextual begin, and that's amazing. There's no beginning. Once the I sort of leaves, and what remains is this cognizing emptiness. It is the primordial context. Everything's happening in it. The universe is happening in it. It's this openness, but it's cognizing. So to me, that's like, my wife had been studying that for about 5 years with an organization, a group that they really focus on that. And when we got together, I said, check out this 19-minute video called Overview. And it's I think on Vimeo. It is the highest, most viewed video on all of Vimeo. And she saw it, and I watched her. She's going, and then she goes, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Almost just sort of comes at it, from a different direction, but it's the very same thing as resting as awareness. Planetary Overview. So yeah. But to me, the heart is hugely significant. It's hugely significant. Developing empathy, being empathic, and some of the most beautiful expressions of that. Jeremy Rivkin gives a very beautiful on that RSA. There's a cartoon where they draw it on a whiteboard or something. Beautiful. I've got all this stuff to put on the websites. My websites, I don't know what you thought, Kaya, but to me, my websites are like home movies. They're not sophisticated. They're not sophisticated. It was like, how do I do this stuff? And, at my age, I had to consciously decide to open to technology. I had friends, I had to like practically twist their arms to get into, just open to it, man. So I had my first Mac computer in 1984, right? It was a Mac 512K.
2 years before I was born, Richard.
Yeah, exactly. I just knew, I said, these computers are important. This is coming. But I didn't, the MS-DOS and all that, I said, I'm not going to do that shit. And then I saw the Mac desktop icon deal, and I said, no, I can do that. And I bought it used $1,800 used, 512K. I asked the woman I was buying it from, I said, what are you getting? She says, oh man, I'm getting the new one. I'm getting the 1 megabyte. Holy shit, that's insane. 1 megabyte, right? Anyway, now we know. I came to Australia with Apple. I on a business visa into Canberra.
Okay.
And that's a whole nother story. But
Yeah, for sure.
Because I'm an Aussie citizen now, dual national.
Ooh, okay, let me try and reorient ourselves throughout all the threads. I'm going to try and pull everything back together here into some sort of coherent
Good.
sphere
Thank
of
God
understanding.
somebody's doing it. Yeah.
So, okay, so everything that you're touching on here forms these planetary human vision keys, or perhaps are the pillars of these planetary human vision keys. When you're talking about the intrinsic awareness, when you're talking about mythic perspective and the heart-based intelligence, the living in awe and wonder, the empathy that you're speaking to, and of course to bring it all the way back to this planetary perspective, the overview effect. I love this quote by the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and it's so basic, it's so succinct, that we went to the moon as technicians, we returned as humanitarians. And it just speaks so potently to the power that being able to zoom out and really see the context in which we're in, as you spoke to. And I watched a YouTube video that you compiled. I don't know, I can't remember when you compiled it, but I loved the image, the very simple image of the Earth rotating continually around and around, and you had this suggestive language over it. And this ties into one of the vision keys, which is reorienting our perception to see things through a mythic lens. And it's through your suggestive language and the questions that you were posing that we can start to gain access to these imaginal realms. And you were saying, if you were actually in space, for real, actually in space, looking down upon the Earth, how would that feel? And if we just take a moment, a sincere moment, to really pause and reflect on that, how it would feel, and allow ourselves to feel that coming up from somewhere in our body. And then you go on, if this planetary overview was fully observed throughout, not just the body and not just the mind, but the heart, the integration of all, how would that feel? And then you go on and on. You know, how can we imagine?
You've done your homework, man.
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's part and parcel of sitting in the hot seat, isn't it? And directing the conversation.
These are all, all of these things. I'm so excited about all of these things. And just a little background about me. I've been doing Ericksonian psychotherapy and clinical hypnosis for about 30 years. So you got it right. Those are suggestive questions, and they're in a very specific format called the implied directive. And in this instance, it begins with that amazing word, 2 letters, if, if, right? And what if does, it switches on the imagination. More important than knowledge, according to Einstein. It's the doorway into the higher self, into the imaginal realm, and into everything, into the creative unconscious. A lot of different words for the same thing, but whatever it is, into the mystery, uppercase, MYSTER. So those questions are designed specifically to produce a visceral response in people. By visceral, that means you feel it. Are you hungry, man? Yeah, I'm hungry. How do you know? Oh, I can feel it, I can feel it in my gut, right? I'm really hungry. I'm feeling it. And I've done tons of emotional work, especially a lot of emotional work, release work with people. And the way we do that is we go in, run the memory. You got it? Yeah. How strong is it? Where do you feel it in your body? They feel in their heart, their gut, or their solar plexus. And then we scale it. How strong is it? It's an 8. Man, I know. If someone says, I had that terrible experience, and all I have to do is remember it. I go into it. And then how strong is it? I feel it right in my solar plexus. Is sitting at an 8.5. I know they're suffering. So we did that meditation. I call it an experience. but the overview, planetary overview experience. Those images are taken from 1.5 million kilometers from the Earth in a place called the L1 Lagrange point, which is a gravitationally neutral spot. Earth's gravity, solar gravity, it's neutral. The camera, sun is to the back of the camera on the satellite. Its satellite is geostationary, I guess they call it. And the Earth is slowly rotating. And that's my friends and colleagues in France, Jean-Pierre Gou and his group, Blue Turn and One Home. Beautiful work they're doing. And they put it all together because these are stills, and then he's put it together so we see it slowly rotating. And then you get people, help them to kind of drop into that deeper state of presence, trance, generative trance, whatever you want to call it, and you drop those questions in. If you were actually in space for real, and with your own eyes actually seeing the Earth for real, how would that feel? Right? So we've got the outcome is the feeling, because when people feel it, it gets real. In the hood, you'll have, I was brought up around African Americans. I have this incredible rapport. I just can drop right into rapport because I might even have African American blood because I won't get into that. But anyway, I really relate. And this is my brothers. In Australia, I kind of miss the African American community. But, if you're in the hood, I wouldn't do this, but if you're in the hood, you might overhear a couple of the brothers saying, "Hey, nigger, what's up with you? I don't know what's up with you today, nigger." They might use that word endearingly as a word of endearment. I wouldn't use it, or I probably could get away with it if I knew someone in, African American. But the point is, the meaning of something has to do with the emotional content that goes with it, right? Whereas you had some racist jerk and he used that same word, it would have a whole different meaning, and there would be a different kind of resonant frequency in his body as differing from someone who's using it as a term of endearment, right? So the feeling that we have when we do that little meditative experience, if you were actually got the image rotating, if you were actually in space, and then if you had that feeling most of the time in your waking hours, so the other, if you had that feeling most of the time, instead of imagining, most of the time, how could you see your behaviors and your relationship to everything shifting? Things that you do, you might end up, I'm more engaged, or I don't do that very much anymore at all. I don't get stuff in plastic anymore, or whatever, right? So yeah, so we've done that to up to 300 people in group, and I can't see them usually because I'm on a stage, but I've had my colleagues, and they'll say, there's a lot of people that are crying when we do that one, right? A lot of people crying. And then I will ask them later, I'll say, hey, so who felt something? And you get a lot of hands. The quality of the image and the sound system definitely helps, right? And so you get a bunch of hands, and you'll say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, just call out some numbers. Level it. 1 is hardly anything, and 10 is like maximum intensity. Give me some numbers. What did you feel in your body? And I've had instances where everything is above 6, 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, and this is in 5 minutes. And really, what you saw is a pretty crude. That was like a one take, and my dear friend who actually helped me with that recording just passed away about 3 weeks ago. I was like, oh man, he was 47. It's like heart attack. Anyway, it's another topic. But the point is, these could be refined, and there's a whole little segue off into that whole thing of ultra high fidelity, virtual reality, not just the headsets, but one of our colleagues has a close friend, Doug Trumbull. He's Academy Award winner. He did 2001. He did Blade Runner. He won the Academy Award for special effects, I think, for Blade Runner, the first one. Ridley Scott, he's in his 70s now. He's got a new technology called magi-pod, and it is a giant curved screen like IMAX, but it's virtual reality. No goggles, screen, group experience. And with groups, the energy builds upon itself. It's more powerful. And the screen disappears and you're just there. I was with my friend Felix in Berlin in 2017 for an overview symposium where I was honored to speak representing Australia. And it was my birthday while I was visiting him in Berlin. And I was there for about a week, and he said, "I got a birthday present for you." We hopped and we were downtown somewhere in Berlin. It's the IMAX cinema, biggest screen in Europe. And they had this one called A Beautiful Planet. And, 3D glasses. We were the only two people in that whole thing on a Monday morning, and just mind blowing. And this new technology leaves that in the dust. So we do believe that there are technologies that are emerging where people don't have to fully go in space to get a very significant, dose of planetary overview. Mm. Okay, I went all over the place there. Where are we?
Where are we? Well, we are certainly
Mythic.
in a place of undeniable importance when it comes to reorienting our language and our perspectives to the mythopoetic, the imaginal realms. Yeah. Finding a way that we can integrate technology in a beneficial way, because there's no denying that technology has certainly paved a destructive path forward and is largely could be associated with one of the reasons that we find ourselves within this collective stupor, as you spoke to much earlier on. But there's also the importance of reorienting ourselves back into a place where we can tap back into these trance states that were so integral to such a significant portion of our human biological evolutionary path. The entire span of our Paleolithic and Neolithic ancestors, which maybe went from 95 to 97% of our time here on this planet as what we might call human beings. So there's no doubt that there are all of these important avenues for us to gain what we might consider this overview effect, so that we can start to perceive ourselves more as planetary humans in alignment, in harmony with this resonance of each other, of all our relations, and as our planet as a whole. And of course, not to mention the entheogenic or the psychedelic experience as well. You mentioned that they are certainly not necessary, but it is another path, a particular sacred medicine path that one can go down to experience some sort of overview effect. And that perhaps is getting even stranger, because we're getting a very overview effect, but almost a real interiority of human consciousness, which can pave the path to this great expansiveness when it comes to these feelings of interrelation and interconnectedness. And perhaps one thing that I would love to touch on more with you is the ways in which resonance or resonant causation flows or manifests within our, I was going to say physical reality, but maybe just energetic reality. There are ways in which it's very, very common to see these syncing up of various things. For example, the menstrual cycles. When women get together, they can experience the syncing up of the menstrual cycles with each other, but not just with each other, but with one of the great celestial bodies in the sky that you were speaking to before, the moon. There's the metronome synchronization, which you had written somewhere along the line. So there's these various capacities in which we can see the very obvious synchronization of things coming into this resonant harmony.
Yeah. Well, this whole idea of synchronization, from my point of view, currently, I see that everything really is synchronized. And that takes us into a dimension, or an elaboration of the mythopoetic living, which is, for me, which I've been doing this since about 1991, living life as a waking dream, right? So, and now I'm not the only person that has ever thought that, right? I know Rumi talks about it, and Goethe, German philosopher, and just all through mystical history of mysticism, you have this thing, well, this place is it's like a dream. It seems really, really real to me. They say, yeah, but there are categories of consciousness or awareness that make this look like a dream, because that is a much more tangible category of reality and that's back to intrinsic awareness. But for example, I've had some really amazing synchronicities that have informed my life, and just to sort of demonstrate that. And that's the sort of thing, you have a synchronicity. So that's Jung coined that expression, or really popularized it, that it's things that are connected acausally, right, by meaning. So it means, it's connected by meaning. For instance, I was doing training groups of people, and I was using what's called an Idio-dynamic method of inducing trance. And it causes the hands to be together. You tune into the heart's field, and then you give one of those directives, and the hands come together all by themselves. It's an autonomous response. And they're going into trance as that's unfolding. But I'm very interested in the integration of the masculine and feminine principles. That's like Carl Jung, that was sort of his final, the summum bonum of his individuation process, was this integration of the sacred wedding, the divine marriage, the king and the queen integration, the sun and the moon. And so I was teaching people how to do this, groups of people of 15 to 20 people at a time. And I would say, so what we're going to do today is I'd like you to assign, not male or female, but the masculine and the feminine principle. Assign the feminine principle to one hand. And I didn't go right or left. I just said, you assign it. Represents the feminine. That's receiving, that's feeling, that's being, right? As differing from acquiring, doing, and thinking, right? Mm-hmm. That's more the masculine. So I said, assign one of those so that everyone got it, everyone's got it. And then I do this sort of, you're tuning into your hands, electromagnetic field of the heart, and then I'd say, as soon as your deep inner mind is integrating further the masculine and feminine principles, hands will come together all by themselves. So the hands are coming. It's pretty amazing, because once they do, and so I was doing that for about 3 months with groups of people, just as part of, because I could do it, because that's what I was. I could do anything with these guys, and I said, I'm interested in that. Simultaneously, this is in 2012. I had friends from the Sunshine Coast where I live going up to Cairns, Northern Australia, to see the solar eclipse, this rare occurrence going right through Cairns. And it was on a Wednesday. I think it was the 14th of November, 2012. And it was like, oh man, I'd love to see it. But I had only that one day off, and I couldn't leave. So I just had to tough it out down here. And it's 85% total. And so I do this pinhole viewer, piece of paper, put a pinhole through it, and you can see this tiny, with a little crescent, it's like very unsatisfactory. I go into my office, sliding doors open, and I'm sitting in there feeling, kind of like, gee, I would just love to be up there with a couple of my friends who are up there watching this total solar eclipse. And suddenly, now in my office, I had about 30 art, just like in the background in your office there, I had all these different kinds of images. Most of them were evocative of something, but I had only one that was an image of what in Tibetan Buddhism is called a yab-yam position, which is some bodhisattva or something is sitting in a lotus posture, and then he has his consort facing him, and then they're in sexual union, and it is the archetypal image of the masculine and feminine integrated. I had only one image in my whole office out of about 30 images all over the place of that kind of thing. And I'm in my office in that sort of kind of, gee, I wish I was up in Cairns. And suddenly, like about that big, a crescent is in my office on the wall. I'm going, holy shit, the eclipse has come into my room, into my office. And it's traveling across the wall slowly, across the wall. And it's headed right towards the only image that has anything to do with the integration of the masculine and feminine, right? There are two of these bodhisattva figures in that yab-yam position, one above the other, a small one and a big one, and there's a little gap between the two. And so I'm sitting there and I go, I wasn't very phone savvy, but I'm going to take pictures of this. So I get 14 pictures of it traveling slowly across the room and it coming in and it comes straight into that image, and it goes right between those two images, and sort of, so it's a unification of two unifications. So it's the sun, moon, masculine, feminine, and these two things. It's my whole background and my whole orientation that had been unfolding for months of this very powerful. And, you know, and then it just stopped there, and based upon the structure of the building or whatever, it just disappeared. And I later found out my friend who had one of those votive candle holders out on a table out in the yard, and had little shards of mirror that had been embedded in this thing, and it must have been one of those that had projected it into, this is the mathematics of the thing, projected it into the office, and it had moved across the wall, boom, right into that most place of integration of the masculine and feminine. It was just like, it was amazing. So that kind of thing, I've had probably about 7 or 8 of those kinds of bigger, like undeniable, that is totally bizarre. And that's what Jung would call a synchronicity. I had a synchronicity about Jung's synchronicity of the scarab beetle. But I won't get into that. I have a lot of stories. Won't get into that. But the point is that I encourage people, if you could live your life as a waking dream, right? And then the question is, if this was happening, if this was a dream, if what's happening right now was a dream, and I was having this dream, and I woke up later and I had to tell someone, what would be the characteristics of the symbolism of this dream? I was having this dream, and the whole world went into this like pandemic, and people were really afraid. And they call this thing, it was called the coronavirus. And what's a corona? Well, a corona in outer space, it's a ring around the sun. In the atmosphere, it's a rainbow kind of circle around the sun, but it's also the halo, the corona around the heads of saints. It's a mandala. It's a symbol of wholeness. It's bizarre. It's a Mexican beer, you know. You know, that company has apparently gone out of business. I think they've really suffered because people couldn't get around the name. But anyway, the point being, if I was having that dream, and what's the virus doing? It's like it's making business as usual impossible. For whatever reason, people are afraid, because people are afraid of change, right? If this was a dream, it was a dream. All right, man, what a dream. You won't believe this dream I had, right? So that's my dreamscape. I'm living in that dream. And there's a lot of people that say, yeah, there is a category of reality that makes this look like a dream. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that is amazing. And then you begin to realize everything is synchronized. So it's all synchronicity. And then there's the really big ones that stand out, that really like, slap you in the face. Mm-hmm. Wake up, dude, because consciousness matters. All consciousness matters. We are not these weak little insignificant, in relation to the size of the planet, we're very small, but consciousness itself, the whole universe is contained in that intrinsic awareness. So like, okay. Oh, you mean, so consciousness matters. Yeah. Literally also, as mattering as a verb, matters, the whole cosmic circumstance. Anyway. Yeah. So that's the kind of the living mythically, and you have fun with this stuff. That's how I did it. I just started having fun with it. And there's just a whole slew of synchronicity that I could just elaborate upon. I won't right now, but it's like, I do workshops on these things, and it's just fun. I love all this stuff. And I'm very excited by it all, because it's just the stuff. I don't know. It's my soul stuff. Okay.
Coming up for air.
Yes.
Yeah. Something that comes to mind for me, and if you'll indulge me here for a moment, I can feel a thought train coming on, is perhaps how we link this in with what physics calls quantum entanglement. Perhaps, let me try and orient myself here. Yeah, so if we have the tiniest of subatomic particles that are joined and separated, and the spin is changed on one of those particles, the spin will simultaneously change on the other, even though they're separated. And from what I understand, at least anyway, this idea, this notion expands out and syncs up with this notion of resonant causation, whereby any thought or any word or any action has the ability to affect the entire mind of the planet and the entire cosmos, perhaps in the most subtle of ways, but we know the idea of a butterfly flapping its wings and causing a hurricane. Everything is interconnected. So I'm thinking about this particular notion of making offerings, or when I go out and I make offerings or pray or engage in rituals, song, dance, gesture, poetry, story, that our offerings have a direct resonance, a direct effect on the natural world around us, from, reciting that poem when we're walking through the forest, or creating a flower mandala down by the creek, or singing a song to the birds, to the sun, to the moon. It's like all of these articulations are interwoven into the greater web of life in one way or another. So this is one of the musings that has come through as I'm listening to you speak about all of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always encourage people, myself included, to infuse those ritual acts with the meaning, the deepest meaning that can be infused within them, because that raises the resonance. Not to do them, I'm going to do a flower mandala. Okay, yeah, because it's a good thing to do. But and I'm certainly not suggesting that's the way you do it. But that if we view any of our behaviors from that platform of like, what does this do to my frequency? A great resource is that book by David Hawkins, Power versus Force. And he's got that scales of map of consciousness. And he says, once you get over 200, it starts going. And I like the example, you carry a resonance into the world. We move through the world, and it's a bit like a little candle on a birthday cake. It's a little candle, a little flame. And in a dark room, if that candle's lit, well, it doesn't keep, not an auditorium, but in a bedroom, you light a little candle, you can see pretty much what you need to see. So the same is true if we carry our resonance, we mind our resonance, and then we intensify our resonance by these kinds of things that we're talking about. We are like that candle. We carry that light into the world, and we do, and the world changes, and so everything that we do matters. And if we can have meaningful, beautiful ritual engagements, that has an effect, and I'm a bit of a generalist. There is a great book that came out, the writer Paul Levy, Levy, Paul Levy, called The Quantum Revelation. The great Human Potential, one of the founders, Jean Houston, she said it's probably the most powerful book she's ever read. Paul Levy is very much into this waking dream business. He's been one of my inspirations from a variety of ways. Anyway, he goes into it in great depth. John Archibald Wheeler is one of his great sources in this line. And that consciousness, it really seems like it's one of the foundational elements of reality, not the epiphenomena that they've been trying to hammer us with. Like, you just get a certain degree of neural complexity and like a brain fart, out comes this thing. Consciousness probably doesn't have any adaptive feature, but anyway, we just happen. It's all meaningless, none of that stuff. It seems like consciousness really is necessary to collapse the wave into particulate matter, a quantum wave. So I don't know, it's a kind of physics is kind of coming around, already has come around really, but the implications are so radical that very few scientists can. Some do, but a lot. I can't take that up. I can't. Right. But what needs to happen sometimes, some of the old school just needs to literally die off, and a lot of the younger people coming up who are they're not so invested in, I did 45 years in my academic career teaching, when I went to the University of Florida back in 1970, there were people they were like fire and brimstone preachers of existential absurdity, nihilism. That, I mean, they would get excited teaching that everything is utterly absurd and meaningless. They would get excited about it, and I just didn't get it. It's amazing. You can, if you adopt that view fully, it's amazing to think of that as a possibility, but it's not, doesn't do shit for your resonance, I'll tell you. It's like, you'll go down. You are likely to be depressed if that's what it is. It's meaningless. Doesn't matter what you do, it's meaningless. And now we see, back to McKenna, culture's not your friend. One of my teachers years ago said, we kind of live in a misdirected civilization. And then back to stuff you've said about, this whole idea of separation, where somehow we're separate, we're separated out, and we're not connected. To me, spirituality is defined as my relationship to everything, That's how when I think of spirituality, I don't think of religion per se. Maybe the original sense of religion, to relink back to my relationship to everything, to reconnect. That's yoga, union, yoke up. But there are a lot of people. I love young people, especially under 40s. I just love humans. Even some humans are doing terrible things, absolutely. But when you dig into their hearts, I did therapy at facilities where we had hardcore meth users. I did once who was a collection guy for a bikie gang, right? So he did, how many did, I think he did 4 collections a day, and these are collections, big scar going. I liked the guy because, that in his heart of hearts, there's so much beauty there. But he said, Richard, you don't need to be afraid of me. And I said, I'm not afraid of you, dude. I was not afraid of him at all. But I dug in a little bit and said, well, what does it mean you do collection for the gang? He says, it means I go out and people that owe money, I get it. And I said, so you just get it? He says, I get it, whatever it takes, I get it. He was only like about 24 years old, a pretty big guy. Really? He says, yeah. I said, how long have you been doing that? He said, I've been doing it for 2 years, nonstop, day after day. Right? What a reality. But the point is, I worked with him, and I could see in his heart he was a beautiful person. And we just, And that is why it's so important. Follow your bliss, but also we need to follow our blisters. Our blisters. And what are our blisters? That is what some refers to as the shadow work. It is getting into the negative ego, what the Native Americans call the wetiko, which is like a sick viral infection in our minds, in our souls. It's like you look at things and go, how in the hell is that going on? How do they put that pipeline in there? Who's running the show? And you think about in a corporate setting, right? I was having a dream, and half the people who are high up level vice presidents in corporations were sociopathic, psychopathic nut jobs. Because they are. They don't have a feeling body, or they can't connect to it. And so they just think about their own self-interest, and they're in love with themselves, and narcissistic disorders. And they don't think about how other people feel. I mean, that's going on. That's going on in a fairly pronounced way. I've known a number of people in the corporate, and they said, I've met, and you can just type that in probably to many search engines, and psychopaths, sociopathic behavior in corporations, and it'll probably come up for you. Yeah, so that's a very important thing. There's this thing about jumping over stuff with our spirituality. It's so important working with that emotional body. And so I've had the honor to do years of that work with others and with myself. I can remember working on my sadness back in, say, 93, and it felt like someone had taken a hammer and just whacked me, right on my sternum. I had so much sadness just so much sadness. My eyelids were twitching all the time, and I felt they were always tearing up. And this is especially difficult for men sometimes, because men have been conditioned: be tough, be hard, be a man. I was at men's gatherings in the early 90s, so 92, 93, up here closer to Queensland. And I remember some of the guys were doing workshops, and they were like drill sergeants. Hey, man! That like this big, tough kind of, I'm going, what is wrong with this picture? And it is that thing where to be vulnerable, you have to be super strong to be vulnerable, right? So anyway, that emotional work, very important to heal our emotional bodies. Because underneath all that pain and shame and hurt and betrayal and all that are these deep, principles of intrinsic awareness, which are states of being: love, pure beingness, oneness, okayness, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I love the articulation, which I haven't heard before. Follow your bliss, but also follow your blisters. And
I didn't make that up. I heard it somewhere, but I say yes, because that's so much of my work is helping people to get okay with their blisters. The pain is, Carl Jung made this statement that really neurosis is just a result of insufficient suffering. People avoid suffering, and then they have all this stuff that's just bubbling up, and they're acting in all this kind of strange behavior that they do, from smoking cigarettes, shooting up, whatever. Don't feel that pain. Stay away from it. Get busy, do, all that stuff. So and I said, no, that's so important. It doesn't mean stay stuck in it, but if you can feel it, you can heal it, right? What you resist persists, all these lovely little rhymes. You resist it. Well, how do we resist it? By making it bad, by judging it. It's bad. In fact, I've seen so many really excellent sources of information about the emotional body and stuff, but still very often it's positive and negative emotions. That's what they call them. And it's, I don't know about you, Kyle, but if it's negative, it's very easy for my analytical mind to go, that's bad. And bad's bad. And push bad away. Resist it. Fight it. Make it wrong. Go to war against it. And what you resist persists. It's just like a little child. You've got your little 2-year-old daughter. And if you have to set her down, and you love holding her, but if you have to because something's come up and she thinks you want to get rid of her, what does she do? What does she do?
Wow. It's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, she clings tighter. And it's the same way with the emotional body. If we try to get rid of it, it clings tighter, and then it snowballs, compounds. So, follow your blisters. Don't jump over that work. That's super important. Some call it shadow work. But, and you know what? With psychedelics, I imagine there are some people, based upon their conditioning, they really need to do them under skilled supervision. I'm not for just random. Those things are powerful tools, and they should not be done, haphazardly, chaotically. But they will help us to get down into the darkness. I was reading an account of some facilitator in Hawaii who would do ayahuasca facilitation, and his first question he would ask, did you suffer when they were back? Did you suffer? Because sometimes we just have to suffer through the authentic suffering of what we have avoided. Because, man, we come through a lot of pain as human beings. Just coming up, just to not accepted and loved by the parents, which is so easy. Just very few parents are trained to be parents. It's easier to get a driver's license than to you can. Sex is fine, and people can do that, no difficulty. But to actually have a baby and to raise that baby, more training to get a driver's license. That's what I meant. most people do more training to get a driver's license than they do to raise a child. And
yeah, I typically make the off-cuff remark that there are a lot of children raising children out there in the world.
Absolutely.
I was going to say before that I've certainly experienced my fair share of suffering during ayahuasca experiences and other psychedelic journeys, and of course outside of that as well. But two things that I wanted to touch on. One, something I wanted to do much earlier in the conversation was actually comment on the on your skill level when it came to the mimicry of Terence McKenna. And and secondly, I wanted to tie this back into what we were speaking about before, which is this polarity between resonant causation versus impact causation, and exactly what we're talking about when we are to look through the lens of that phrase to follow your bliss, but also to follow your blisters. And the way that I was musing on it to some degree as you were speaking, I was thinking about the difference between the masculine way of penetrating with force and this kind of impact that we might find when we are avoiding going into the blisters, because we're trying to use force or impact into some other direction because we don't want to go fully into it. We don't want to become resonant with it. So what I'm thinking about is I'd love to get your thoughts, if you have ever mused on this yourself, between what someone has recently articulated for me. There's a difference between the hero's journey. The hero's journey can come across with perhaps more of a masculine energetic component to it versus perhaps what we might consider to be the initiation by descent from a feminine point of view. And if we're looking at it from resonant causation versus impact causation, then we might start to see that the feminine way of coming into the descent is to resonate with all the emotions, the feelings, to really feel them on a deep level so that we can process them. Whereas the masculine might be to push, to drive, to get on the white horse with the sword and go out there wanting to slay the dragon. So there's, I feel like there's certainly a place for both contextualized. Yeah. There's certainly a context where they both fit in and how we integrate them both into our lives to gain that all-encompassing, holistic method of becoming a planetary human.
Great question. Great, very penetrating insights. So appreciate your way of seeing and feeding that back. But first to Terence McKenna. There was a guy, when I was brought up in America, right? And in the early 60s, there was a game show participant named Paul Lynde. And he used to speak very much like Terence McKenna. Terence McKenna, and I heard a guy on YouTube who did the best Terence McKenna imitation. If I could only send him a little message, just slow it down slightly. He was spot on. But okay, so that's that. But now I wouldn't say, this is how I'd frame it up. I would say not resonant causation versus impact causation. I'm incline myself and others towards the idea not either or, rather both and.
Sure.
So there's an inclusiveness, right? And just knowing that all these are different orientations, and one of my really dear friends said, that his reckoning was that impact causation, which we have been doing as a species for millennia, right, is really just a very thin sliver of the way the pie of reality, a thin slice of the pie of reality, and that really things work overall more by resonant causation. We have been so out of balance, the masculine and feminine principles, the patriarchy and chauvinism and emasculation, and all that stuff has been way out of balance, as cultural observers and have told us that we need to support. It's already happening, but we need to support and foster the re-emergence of the goddess principle, the goddess. That's the divine feminine principle, right? So it's not that we have to totally abandon the masculine. We want to purify the masculine, not chauvinism, right? Because that castrates men, actually, right? But the real masculine, and I saw a thing. I posted it on I think my Facebook wall, but it was an analysis of the film Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and went into a lot of those things. And Jordan Peterson, a Toronto psychologist, gives a nice little recap at the end, which is quite illuminating. Yeah, so it is. It's not rejecting the masculine. It is the purified masculine, seeking that, and which are the ideals of king, warrior. And it's not warrior; it's the valor that the warrior has to right the wrongs, kind of like the chivalry of King Arthur and the Round Table, the magician and lover, and simultaneously to bring in, to foster the emergence of the divine feminine. So Joseph Campbell, the great academic mythologist, he had the hero's journey. He broke it down essentially into the three primary components, and then it gets expanded out up to 17 or more different components of the hero's journey. Heroine journey, but it is separation, initiation, and return. Those are the three big elements. The initiation is that it is going to that place of probably danger, potential death, darkness, mystery, to get the boon, to get the elixir, to get the whatever, the golden fleece, and then to bring that back, a life-enhancing return. And there's an interesting thing. Douglas Gillette, who co-authored that book with Robert Moore, a king, warrior, magician, lover, he wrote another book called The Shaman's Secret. And then it's subtitled Lost Resurrection Teachings of the Ancient Maya. And in there, what was the shaman's secret? Well, I'll tell you right now, the way he puts it, it was because the Mayan were not happy-go-lucky, peaceful astronomers. They were full-blown. They did torture and they did heart, the whole deal. They were like, you wouldn't want to have been captured by them and play the ball game, right? It was really full-on. Mm-hmm. But the essence of it, where he cooks it down beautifully, this is one of my favorite books, and I got a lot of books with that one. The Shaman's Secret, Douglas Gillette. And the essence is embrace death from a place of intensified being. That's it. Embrace death. So that's what they did. But that's what, if there's going to be a warrior thing that goes on with people, that's it. Embrace death. So it takes courage, right? And that notches you up on Hawkins' consciousness map. And courage is the turning point, from lower resonance to higher resonance, right all the way up to ultimate enlightenment, whatever that is, right? Mm-hmm. So embrace death from a place of intensified being. And so that is like, we're tough, and okay, yeah, I was abandoned by my mother, whatever, or I was sexually abused by whoever, right? That's terrible. We're never going to condone any of that stuff. But did you survive? Yes. And in a way, we are very tough. The stuff I've heard is blood curdling through the years of what has happened to people, especially some of the people who have resorted to the most extreme ways of numbing out, like ice, methamphetamines, which is it's like, that's a pandemic right now all over the world. It's crazy. Stuff that people are taking now to numb. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. So hero's journey. Separation. We already are. We are separated. We get that. We grow up, and by the time we're 7, we're separated. Wordsworth, in his beautiful poem Ode, Intimation of Immortality. Whither hast fled the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower. He's talking about, we were there. It seems like we came out of heaven, and then we gradually entered the light of plain day, as he called it. We've entered this, it just kind of plain, oh yeah, just like, oh yeah, off to work, that sort of thing. So I think the hero's journey, I do believe it directly, men or women, these tales are not just for men, and women have their own category of journeys. I may approach it from a slightly different, but that it is that balancing. We need to bring the balance between the masculine and feminine principles. I've known many women who are way over in the masculine side of things, right? And unfortunately, some of them get into politics, and they're not really they're not carrying forward the principles of the divine feminine. They've just learned how to be men with vaginas. You know what I'm saying? They might wear a dress, they might have female sexual organs, but they're just hard ass men, and they have to. And I don't blame them, because they really have it's been very tough, very, very rough for women, very, very rough. And the same with, I was in Byron Bay, and there was a big thing that went on for the fires and helping people and all of that. And so it was a beautiful function. The Uplift community put that on, and I was fortunate to be there. And they had a panel on the stage, and there were two people from Aboriginal community, and one was a man in his late 40s perhaps. And he goes, "Now I'm going to say something, and I know most of the audience were Caucasian," says, "but white privilege, right?" I just couldn't. Yeah, absolutely. I was brought up in that kind of situation, and yeah, so it's been very difficult. Male privilege, very difficult to be a woman in so many ways, and I'm always supporting the empowered feminine. My heart just goes out. I start crying when I see films where you can see, wow, yes, the empowered feminine came through, and it just really gets me. Just wow, right in the heart. So it's what we need. We men need that. We need to have the empowered feminine principle, where we can be the change, right? Feel our pain, and receive. That receiving is a big deal. I love in Islam, they have the hands like this, just that beautiful gesture of receiving, which I think is great. Yeah.
Deep musings, my friend.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we could continue on for many more hours, going into many other related topics.
I wish we lived near one another. I'd love to hang out with you.
For sure, 3D.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love listening to what you have to say. I think
you too, man.
Perhaps to wrap all of this up, actually, there's a poem that you wrote. I'm not sure if you have it in front of you or if you know it off the top of your head, but what I'm going to do is pull it up here on my computer. It's called Bottom Feeders. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Would you indulge me if I read it out myself?
You read it. No, you read it.
Okay,
great. I don't memorize it.
I will read it out, and then I'll share my musings on why this particular piece of poetry struck a chord within my own being, and then perhaps I'll get you to speak on your thoughts on it.
Okay.
Bottom Feeders. How far down might the nature of conscious experience be stretched, pulled and extended to an ultimate extreme, only to open our eyes at the very bottom, a limit, and a boundary where as human beings we swim and feed upon the details of our days. This evening in the warm setting sun, marvelous complexity flies up upon the recoil. Millions of self-luminous fish ascend from the deep and flow outwards onto the sandy vastness of galaxies. Finally, we sense the all-pervading interconnections where the darkness of the great waters is enfolded by the silent tapestry of night. With an ancient hunger amidst the respiration of plants and trees, may we move peacefully upon the earth with awareness and, without words, feed upon infinities. And without words, feed upon infinities. I love this image of being in stillness, in silence, and beyond the image, the very notion, the very behavior, the cultivation of this state of being to tap into the what I call the deep reservoirs of stillness that reside at the core within ourselves, the stillness and the silence from which everything emerges, the internal, the external, as within, so without, as above, so below. And I know from my own personal experience the depth, the richness, the meaning, the intuitive capacity, the wisdom, the connection that can be found beyond the words, or perhaps articulated a little bit differently. Yeah, perhaps it's before the words, beyond the words, before the words, but within this, the wellspring of this stillness, the rivers of silence. And just following my own musings here, that's why something like this show is just so great for me, because it provides balance and gives me an opportunity to have conversations with other fantastic people who are on the path, and to be able to share the message verbally, whatever the message is, but to bring my own awareness and state of functioning into this very cognitive based, verbal, language oriented way of being, because and also to cultivate that as a practice, because really a lot of my time is spent in silence, in stillness, of course, outside family life and beyond the 2-year-old, or at least it's returning my awareness to this place time and time again, and observing how everything really is arising from this place of stillness, this place of silence. And in saying that, I'm certainly not necessarily antisocial, but I do very much value the quiet places where, instead of trailing off and following the thoughts and spilling forth the words on the tip of my tongue, it's dropping into a place, the receptivity, the receiving of listening, and listening to the language beyond our human-centered words into a place of timelessness, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things, one with the great mystery. So it's one particular reason why that struck a chord, that particular piece of poetry.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to have met you. And Ron Guerin, the astronaut, he says the key is we, right? The key is we. And the Hopi elders say the time of the lone wolf is over. This is a time to come together in a sacred manner. And from one perspective, this whole idea of we're the human tribe. I don't like to be too much separating, and it's like, this is my tribe, that's your tribe, but to find our kindred spirits, and so I'm really happy to have met you, and I look forward to not just in this format, which is great, and I really appreciate that you've allowed me to that you've interviewed me so brilliantly, and you just go down, man. You go in and take it apart in a beautiful way. But to just to get to know you as a kindred spirit, because I look at the people that I know now a lot through social media. Nothing's good or bad, only thinking makes it so. I think it was Shakespeare. That's true in a way. I don't agree totally with that, but yeah. But I've met so many wonderful, wonderful people who they're such wonderful beings on planet Earth right now, to midwife this birthing that's occurring, and it's happening, people. It's happening, and look for that. That's just look for that. It's all out there. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Mirrored right back to you. Hey, before we finish up then, I will have all of the links in the show notes of this episode, which all of our listeners can find. But before we do go our separate ways, is there anywhere specific that you would like to direct people, or anything that you'd like to mention when it comes to you, yourself, your vision moving forward from here onwards?
Well, I think just the 2 websites, and I have contacts. Just my email will pop up with those contacts, but I'm happy to meet more kindred spirits. And yeah, what do you think? Can you think of any other any suggestions for following up for people who want to follow up what they've heard? That's kind of why I did the website.
Yeah, look, the planetaryhuman.com and Overview Institute Australia.org. Yeah, I will have that and all of the other references that we've mentioned, or at least as many as we can gather in the show notes in due time. Look, lastly, just as we opened up the space, Richard, I'd love to invite you to share anything that comes to mind or heart in honor of the sacred and in honor of closing up our time and our space together.
Okay. Well, what comes up is be true to oneself and to follow one's bliss. That I know that's like how to mine our own authenticity. You know, what we are is to not buy into a limited idea of what we are. We are a great mystery, and to open up to the magnificence that we are. And yeah, that's about it. I'm pretty spent. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Succinct. Yeah. Thanks again, Richard. What a pleasure it was to connect on this fine morning.
Yeah. Same. Thank you.